I've been living in Da Nang and Ho Chi Minh City for the last 7 years combined, and it afforded me the optionality to retire early in my 40s because of the insane value and quality of life that Vietnam still offers.
15 years ago, you left California, San Francisco to be specific, for Mexico. This is basically during the 2008 great financial crash. You lived in Mexico for a couple of years, kind of made your way to Australia. And then from Australia, you took a puddle hopper to Asia. And for the last 7 years, you've been in Vietnam. And during this entire time, you've lived abroad. It wasn't like this is a few stints here, a few stints there. So what advice do you have for people looking to retire abroad as someone that's done it for 15 years, and in particular in Vietnam or Asia, if you want to be a little more broad?
I think the first thing, obviously, is just to do your background and your research. But another huge one is to get yourself to these places if you've never visited. So I know that for some people, it can be a financial burden. But if you want to have long-term success, the people who get over here and do 30 days in Bangkok, 30 days in Da Nang, Vietnam, and another 30 days in maybe Boracay in the Philippines, they spend 3 months kind of doing a scouting trip to know what's going to suit them individually. Those are often the people that end up having a lot of success. Some of those people end up switching and turning the 90-day trip into a year because they realize once they're here often that some of the things they were scared or worried about leaving behind back home were myths or were at least, sort of whatever, ghosts. Yeah.
As someone that's lived in Vietnam for 7 years, and I mentioned you started your journey in Mexico, and you're Canadian by birth, how would you say that Mexico compares to Vietnam? And it's been a few years since you've been in Mexico, so maybe some of your numbers might be off. But what would you say would be the biggest difference between Mexico and Vietnam?
I'll break it into two bits. Culturally, the biggest difference is that the reality is the culture shock is less in Mexico. You can go there. I was working at a language exchange center in a local university, so I was teaching English lessons, and I was taking Spanish lessons at that same language exchange for free or whatever. They were subsidized for me, and it didn't really take that long to learn Spanish. I'm not talking about like the fluency. The fluency comes later, but I'm saying about what you need to sort of function on a daily basis. At the time, I was in Mexico. I was back and forth between Mexico and California, and Northern California, between like 2008, 2011, and 12, and you're really integrating. California is full Spanish speakers. Like when I went back to San Francisco, I would keep practicing my Spanish with local Latin community, with people like coworkers. I was working in a set of like hostel, hotel, doing some tour guide stuff in San Francisco. So I was still in the sort of tourism or travel industry then. And it was really, I don't want to say easy to learn the culture, but it's a different kind of thing. It's really accessible. Maybe accessible is the right word. When I came to Vietnam, I'd spent 1 year in China before, and I'd been planning on getting teaching work in China. I'd essentially done a scouting trip, like I talked about earlier, in China to see which cities, which parts of China would work for me. And then a job offer came in Vietnam out of left field. And when I arrived here, it was like, where am I? And I traveled a lot in Asia. I'd spent a lot of time in Thailand by this point. I've been to Cambodia. I'd traveled, I've been around Indonesia, Bali. When I was living in Australia, I was doing a lot of travel in my time off from teaching in Southeast Asia, knowing that it was a place that it really drew me in, that I loved it. But I'd never been to this country, and it's a completely different country. It's the realities of living here. I've been spending a few weeks here are so different at home. Like the language barrier is absolutely enormous. And then there's all the unspoken stuff, right? The customs, the way people use body language or looks or glances is just totally different. And then the sort of background, even though there was French colonization here, and obviously there are a lot of Catholics, like in Mexico or in Canada or Europe or whatever, it's not the same. like the roots of the culture are just totally different, right? It's Buddhist or even Hindu and the Cham culture farther back. So many of your assumptions are totally wrong in a place like Vietnam, Whereas a lot of my assumptions in Mexico are, basically accurate.
You have a YouTube channel, Evan A, and you help people transition to Vietnam. What are some of the biggest questions that you are asked? What's the main concern that whether Canadians, Americans, Australians, Brits have?
Yeah, the biggest question is just if cost arbitrage is real. They want to know, right? The numbers seem so ridiculous, so shocking or far-fetched, even for someone who's lived in, say, Mexico, right? That it's almost hard to believe. And the reality is that it is. Like the numbers that people are putting up, putting on YouTube, putting online, or you're reading in sort of blog posts, that's a real massive benefit of coming here. In Vietnam in particular, the whole region, but in Vietnam in particular, the local currency, the VND or Dong, is one of the weakest currencies in the world. So, it's a literal sense. If you're bringing in US dollars or you're bringing in euros or whatever, Canadian, Aussie dollars, your purchasing power, like the purchasing parity, is shocking. And I think what the people who I'm trying to help, obviously anyone just curious about Vietnam will watch the videos, but people who I actually end up talking to and trying to benefit in a relocation sense, that's enormous for them, not necessarily because they're going to try and live on $1,000 a month, but because on, say, a small fixed income of $2,500 a month, $3,500 a month, which gets you nothing in, say, Ottawa or Denver or something like that, you can come over to Da Nang, Vietnam, and just exponentially raise your quality of life, right? Like in a real way.
You would say that the financial component is the most talked about and the main impetus for people moving to kind of contacting you and moving to Vietnam.
Yeah, I guess sort of one precursor to that is that it's a certain type of person in the first place, right? Like maybe I think the data says something like 40 or 50% of Americans are now considering retiring or moving abroad, which is the highest it's ever been. It's the highest it's been in 100 years. But that said, I'd say of the people considering it, how many are really going to do it? Not that many, maybe a quarter of them. So the actual number is probably closer to 10 or 15% of people who are really seriously considering doing this. Like they're looking into the sort of financials of selling their house or downsizing their stuff or something like that. And for them, it is usually a question of logistics and cost and how they would actually, move around the world. Things like all the basics of just moving home, right? How do you move stuff? Which stuff do you need or not need? What can you get over there? How do you set up things like banking, healthcare, social aspects like dating, of course, because if you're going to be successful long-term, you need to find some sort of community or integrate with, a local community or an expat community or some combination.
What country are most of the people living in that contact you? Where are they from?
For me, it's Americans and Canadians. That's because I address a North American audience in my videos. Like the majority of my videos, I do some vlogging and sort of like unscripted, stuff I'm doing in my day over here just to show people what it's like. But really the majority of videos are scripted. Like I have a background in blogging, like writing, for Blogger for, basically the whole time I was a teacher. So my videos are scripted and I script them for that audience. Like I often think basically of one or two particular friends, like people I know back home who kind of fit the profile. Like they're curious, they're adventurous. Maybe they have a decent amount of money, but it's not quite enough that you could say retire at 50 years old in Toronto, Canada, or you could retire 10 years early in Vancouver or Seattle, which are both really expensive cities, right? Places with housing crisis. So I try and write my scripts to speak directly to that person or people, one or two of them, and think like, what are they worried about when they're coming over here? What are the sort of like concerns that I can assuage or that I can help talk them through, the scenarios, right? And the big one too is about where you do land, like I alluded to earlier in the location scouting reference, like it is so different for different people, whether they like big cities, they like small towns, they like the beach, they can't handle the heat, so they want somewhere cooler, or the opposite. They're just looking to lie on a beach all day and do nothing, so they could care less about nightlife or dating or something like that. It really is about finding the right context for each individual.
And what's the average age of people that are interested in making this transition?
I would ballpark. I mean, there's all kinds of outliers, so there are 20 something guys and 70 something women, but that the sort of average, median person I'm talking to is usually a guy in his sort of early to mid 50s, an American guy in his early to mid 50s. And again, it's someone in that sort of like $2,500 to $3,500 budget, and it's like, basically you're trying to live off $100 a day. And it's not working. It's not great in Canada or America to try and live off $100 a day right now. Or someone who owns a house or a condo, and that's their sort of primary equity. But you can't retire on that in Canada, right? So people considering like, okay, maybe I sell this small house now. I'm separated, or I have kids that are out of the house and grown. Oh man, are you having a pint of beer? It's like 9 a.m. here. It's made me jealous.
20 years, so it's PM, so
PM, yeah. Cheers. This is my I drink
Cheers.
as much coffee as the Gilmore Girls, so you can see I'm married. I have a wife and daughters. So. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, cheers. I guess I'm kind of interested as someone that's in the United States, and as you mentioned, a lot of your audience and a lot of the people that contact you are in the United States or Canada. Like Latin America, of course, is a quick flight away versus going to Vietnam, which is like, I don't know, 25 hours from, say, Chicago or something like that. How much does that factor into some of these decisions, or is that not? I mean, if you're going to be there for a while, I guess the flight doesn't matter. But if you're snowbirding and you're coming and going a few times a year, it seems like a pretty big barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that comes back to the financial benefit, the financial benefit, or eliminating your financial benefit, because the benefit really comes from spending a long period of time here. So if you're interested in sort of that like slow nomadic or I want to say digital nomad, that's a very corny term, but doing slow nomadic travel, or like the sort of retirement travel option, to people like that, if you're going to do it long term in Southeast Asia, I still think that involves committing to being here in Asia. In other words, to not doing flights back snowbird style. It's just that makes it so unaffordable here. It makes it unaffordable, and it really messes up the logistics for most people. That said, people do it. My parents spent 3 winters in a row in Vietnam. Obviously, they have a huge incentive because they have, myself, their son, and also their grandkids are here. But for the majority of people, it takes away the geo arbitrage benefit if you're sort of flying back and forth, multiple times a year. Whereas if you're doing things like, one of the things I see a lot of is like a guy retires in the Philippines, meets a girlfriend there, maybe a wife there, gets married, spends 6 months there, and then realizes like, things about the Philippines aren't always perfect. Nowhere is paradise. Vietnam isn't either. But they now have this attachment to Asia in the sense that they have a local partner, right? But maybe the city they're in, the town they're in, their house isn't perfect, or it isn't maybe everything they'd imagine to be, or they just literally get curious, because the people who come to Southeast Asia are curious by default, I think. And so that couple will then go and spend 3 months in Chiang Mai, and then spend 3 months in Da Nang, and they'll sort of end up traveling together slowly. And single guys do this too. That is just an example, because there's a couple of guys I know right now in Da Nang, Vietnam, who do that, right? Like American guys who are either dating, engaged, or married to Filipino women, but then are actually traveling around Southeast Asia, and they're not fixed to that single location. They're certainly not buying property or committing to anything, right? They're going on do a 90-day visa here, 30 days here. If it starts raining in this one place, well, I'll leave for rainy season. Or say if it's like there's rice burning seasons here, so like they burn their crops, and whole cities can get really smoky for months at a time. So people are like, well, I'm out. I don't want to be in Chiang Mai or Hanoi or whatever during rice burning season. I'll go to this other place. And again, that's something that the financial aspect that geo arbitrage really enables, right? If the flights are local flights, they're cheap, man. I mean, you can fly for basically $100 from where I am now, give or take, right? I'm saying a one-way flight, $100, give or take, from where I am. You can get to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, or Penang. You can get to Bali and to Indonesia. You can get to anywhere in the Philippines you'd like, basically, although that can be rough because you need to take boats. You can go to Thailand. You can go to Cambodia. More guys are talking about going to Cambodia lately. You could also go to Hong Kong or to mainland China or to Seoul, Korea. I had to do I went to Seoul recently for Busan, the city in the southern part of Korea, to do some administrative stuff. And it took, it's like a 70-minute flight and cost me $55 for a one-way. And as a Canadian, I just was stamped in for 180 days. Like that, it was just so easy, right? But if you're trying to fly back, here's an example. I'm trying to fly back to Canada to introduce my wife and my kids to some old family and friends. I haven't been back for a visit since 2022. And we're thinking it's probably going to cost us $15,000 to $30,000 for a month-long visit this summer, for 4 people. That's more than we live off of for a whole year here.
I watched some of your other videos, and one of the videos you're talking about some of the places maybe not to live in Asia, and you mentioned Malaysia, even though Malaysia is very, affordable. You mentioned Thailand, which he basically says, like, especially Bangkok has gotten insanely expensive. I mean, I guess it's supply and demand. The more people that move there, especially digital nomads. I mean, Thailand's always kind of had this cachet about it. And you also mentioned Cambodia is not, even though again, Cambodia is affordable, but not necessarily a place that you would want to retire to. So, I mean, maybe just start with Thailand. I mean, everyone hears about how great Thailand is. And back in the day, everyone's like, oh, you can live in Thailand like a king or a queen on $1,000. And you're saying in Bangkok, you'd be lucky to find an apartment for $1,500, and that's probably not living like a king.
Yeah, I think, again, it comes down to this idea of if you're trying to just be cheap or if you're actually trying to improve your quality of life. That, the people I meet, not on vacation mode, totally different thing. I think any of those places you just listed are phenomenal places to visit for a few weeks. Cambodia and Angkor Wat, stunning. The Philippines, those islands are gorgeous. They're real. They're postcard material, right? And Thailand is probably the best. I think it's literally the number one tourist destination on earth, or it has been on and off for the last couple of years. So it's not in that sense. It's in the sense that if you're there and you're locked in, you're locking yourself into a 12-month lease. If you want to live in one of those desirable areas in Bangkok, and let's be real, that's what people are drawn to, right? People aren't looking at a sort of 1970s housing block in suburban Bangkok. They're looking at somewhere with an infinity pool. They're looking at somewhere where they can walk out the front door and there's a BTS station. They want, expat bars and a pub to be able to watch an NFL game or a soccer game. And look, man, I'm not judging you. I want all that stuff too. I'm just saying you're not getting that for $1,000 in Bangkok in a month. You're probably not getting it for $5,000 a month, right? I mean, maybe for $5,000 a month, but you get what I'm saying, right? It's like, it's a mega city. It has people from all over the world there. It's an extremely high demand. If you want to be living in those central parts, it's going to cost you. That's simple. Yeah, it's just simple economics. And also, frankly, it's so high demand that there are plenty of other expats who do have that much money who will happily outspend you, right? There's plenty of guys and gals and couples there who will spend $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month and not blink, because that's in their budget.
You want to mention Malaysia?
Sure. Yeah, Malaysia for me is an interesting one. It's actually somewhere that in my head, if I wasn't in Vietnam, where would I be in Southeast Asia with my family and my current situation? It would be one of the most interesting regions for me. It's extremely safe. It's extremely clean. It's extremely affordable. And you're getting really affordable luxury. So like the build quality of the infrastructure in Kuala Lumpur, I'm talking about, right? In the capital city is spectacular. It's modern. It's got a great transit system. It's got a great airport. It's got incredible hospitals, close to what you can get in Bangkok. And it's less expensive than there. People speak English. I mean, you can't underestimate that stuff. But the reality is, you're basically just living in a modern Eastern city instead of a modern Western city, right? Like this shift is not what most people who retire abroad are looking for. Most people retiring abroad are looking for some element of like something tropical, right? And this includes whether, if you're going to Mexico down the coast. Most people are not going to retire in like Guanajuato, Mexico, where I live, smack in the middle of the mountains. They want the coast. They want to see the beach. They want to go to a tiki bar and that kind of stuff, right? And in Malaysia, that means going to somewhere like Penang. And when you're in Penang, also a wonderful, incredible place to visit, it's just all the sort of dynamics, all the positive things I just basically said about Kuala Lumpur don't really exist, right? So you lose access to all that stuff. Look, it's all about context. It's all about that individual choice. And if I'm giving an actual suggestion, the suggestion is always that each person needs to go to their sort of top 3 places and see what's right or what's wrong. For example, people will happily counter me on this, but I don't care. I think the nightlife, the dating scene in Malaysia, it's not that it's non-existent, but it's mediocre. It's not compared to Thailand or the Philippines or whatever. It's not the same. That's true of Vietnam as well. Vietnam's a lot more conservative. Dating here is not like dating in Thailand or the Philippines. It's hard. It's traditional. People are very open and upfront in a direct way. They're going to ask you, what do you do for a living? How much money you make, right? It's talking about on the first date with a woman. No problem. Straight, frank to your face. How much money do you make? What's your job? There's a lot of cultural background here that makes people basically like petrified of like laziness and poverty, right? And they're like, I'm not interested in a lazy guy with no money. And they'll just say that right to your face, right? Whereas at home, there might be some subtlety or some, less direct way of speech.
Yeah, I was in Malaysia for a few months and I was walking around trying to find some beers and people would be like, you're in a Muslim country. Like, what do you think you're going to find, And so I found this guy that had some beer in his like mini fridge in the back of his place. And he's like, how much do you want? And I was like, I'll just take all of them. And he's like, okay. And I was like, can I just like walk down the street and drink this? And he's like, for me, no, I'd be arrested. He's like, for you, you can do whatever you want. You'll be fine. So I was walking down the street drinking these beers, and the looks I got, people were horrified, in Kuala Lumpur.
The cultural thing. Yeah, well, look. Yeah, Malaysia's fun. I like Malaysia. I visited Malaysia, I think, every year, 3 years running. So, like, if you wouldn't go back to a place if you didn't like it. Like, I do really enjoy it, but it's for different things. It's food. It's got an incredible food scene, like a really great food scene. And Penang reminds me of some of those other old colonial towns, but it was a British town. So there's English and there's a lot of that familiarity that I don't have in Vietnam. So for like a week there, I really like that. Like just as a getaway, as a sort of like escape from the day-to-day of Vietnam, but it's not a party spot. Like, let's just be real. It's not. Yeah, especially when you're talking about like, you can fly back to Vietnam and you can get a beer here for 30 cents. Wow. Right? Like the weighing your options. And look, Thailand, whatever anyone says, there's plenty of places in Thailand, especially outside of the very heart of downtown Bangkok, are extremely affordable compared to Europe, compared to back home in the Americas. They're still just incredibly priced.
Have you ever heard of the Expat Insider Report, which is published by Internations at all?
I think so. Is it? Yeah, I think so. Because I do list videos. So I think it does. It has like a sort of quotient and like ranks different countries and different places based on their own metrics. Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, because basically, it's an expat insider community. There's over 10,000 expats, and the expats that actually live in these communities will evaluate and they will rank the countries based on factors such as quality of life, cost of living, career prospect, ease of integration. And for the latest report, this is the top 5. Panama was number 1, Colombia is number 2, Mexico 3, Thailand 4, and where you're currently at, Vietnam, number 5. And the number 6 is actually China, which you mentioned that you lived in as well. So, and I actually saw a video where you mentioned how you would never live in Panama. You kind of bashed Panama. So, how would you, as someone that lived in Mexico, so you have that experience, you've been to Thailand, live in Vietnam, bash Panama, and I don't know if you ever mentioned Colombia, but how would you, in your experience, rank this top 5 list?
Okay, so again, I'm only going to be talking about my individual personal factors. So can we do a quick recap of the country and like whatever, if you want to cut this out, you can. It's Panama, Colombia,
Mexico,
something. Oh, Mexico, Vietnam, and Thailand.
No, okay, Thailand's 4. Thailand's 4. Vietnam's 5.
And I'm re-ranking it based on my own personal needs right now in 2026.
Yeah, if that's what you want to do, yeah, you just rank it any way you want.
Number 5's Colombia. I wouldn't go anywhere near Colombia with my family. It's super fucking dangerous. Don't believe the hype. And anyone who tells you different is absolutely full of it. I'm not going there anytime soon. It's like, would you go to? I mean, look, I know there's beautiful, positive things about lots of countries, but how about this one? Just a quick fact: guns are illegal in Vietnam. Period. Right? Literally, no one out there has a gun. Okay, so like you get hit by a car, you can hit by a motorcycle. No one has a gun. There are no strangers carrying guns. Like that's one of the things that scares me about the Philippines as well. People in the Philippines have guns. You see guns all the time, right? Okay, I'm not going to a place like Colombia by choice where I could get drugged or robbed at gunpoint. If I wanted to do that, I could stay in San Francisco. Right? It's like, so no way. There's no way. Frankly, I wouldn't even, it's just not even on my list right now, frankly. And I know there's incredible things about it. There's wonderful Colombian people in Canada, in the States, in Colombia. But that doesn't mean I want to go there. Personally, I would not go there. Number 4 is probably Panama. It's just not exciting enough for me, frankly. It's too, it reminds me of it's like the Central America Latin equivalent of Singapore. Singapore's awesome to like go to a concert for a day or to walk around and see the tourist sites in 48 hours and to like go see the big, beautiful hotel, maybe do a little shady tax banking on the side, offshore your company, something like that. Like there's benefits to those places. Singapore, I went to the F1 race in Singapore one year, the Formula One race. It's cool, right? Like money can buy cool things, especially in entertainment categories. Saw a Green Day concert. I think that Panama really is like Singapore that way, that there's some money there, there's safety. I was an international school teacher. I know there are teachers who've gone there, live in a kind of gated community or whatever. But personally, I like a little bit more excitement, a little more whatever. Thailand would be 3 for me. Thailand has a bit of everything. I mean, Bangkok, if you have how much it costs to live in Bangkok a month and to really enjoy it, it's a unbelievable city. Unbelievable city. To me, it's like when I landed there in 2011, it was like the excitement of hitting a Paris, a Tokyo, a London, right? It was like a world-class city. And I don't know if people thought of it as a world-class city 15 years ago. I did. It was just on my list of places to go from just hearing everything. And at the time, I'd like read it in books, right? You read it in a tour guide book, or maybe you see an episode of Anthony Bourdain. But like those other places, Bangkok 100% lives up to the hype. And everywhere else you can access in Thailand is incredible. Thailand has really beautiful retirement, holiday, everything infrastructure. The only downside, and it's safe too, it's a safe country relative, is that, it's a little bit more expensive now than it was 15 years ago because the word's out and because of inflation and just, global economics have changed. That's the only thing. Otherwise, frankly, Thailand is still, I think it's still as good or one of the best destinations in the world. It's an incredible place, and I think that it's easy to say, oh, I watched your video. You said Thailand was 2 and Vietnam's 1. It's like, well, okay. Yeah. That's an 8-minute YouTube video, right? You can only say so much in a soundbite, but the reality is they're both incredible, complex, nuanced places. I personally would still put Thailand 3, and I've spent a lot of time in Thailand, but I love Mexico. I just love it. And if there's anywhere honest, like in a really honest way, if there's anywhere in the world I wasn't living right now, other than Vietnam, it would be back in Mexico, because I absolutely love the place. I know it really well. I've traveled top to bottom. You know, I've taken my bus all the way down Baja California from San Diego to La Paz. I've been, you know, way up near the border towns. I've been in El Paso and Juarez. I've been way down to the south where you can like cross over into Belize. Like I've traveled the whole country. And when I left, it was because I'd sort of like burnt myself out on it, basically, right? Like it wasn't because I was thought less of the place. It was just that I'd so thoroughly, you know, become like a adopted Mexican or an expat, a Mexican, that I kind of burned out on it. Like I was there on and off from when I was like 27 until I was 31, 30. And then I moved to Australia, which is just something totally different. But Mexico is absolutely everything. And I feel the same way about it as I do about Thailand. You know, Mexico City, DF, world-class city, stunning, incredible. People come from Europe to there. They come from South America to there. It has everything. It's amazing. It's just more expensive than it was before. You know, the word's out. I also think Mexico is slightly more dangerous in general than Thailand, and in certain spots is extremely dangerous. Generally, it's not dangerous for you as like an expat or a retired abroad type person, unless you're going to doing something particularly dangerous, right? Like driving a particular stretch of highway or going out to certain places at certain hours. But I think that's everywhere in the world, right? If you're out at 2 a.m. drunk looking for illegal narcotics, is there somewhere to do that that's safe? Like, no, right? Like, and I get that kind of question from people relocating where I'm like, are you kidding? You know, like they're like, is it safe to try and buy weed at like midnight on this party street? It's like, are you kidding? Like in most of Southeast Asia, if you get arrested with drugs, you'll go to jail for life. Is that a joke? Like you can Google that, you know, but people aren't joking. They really think that. They're like, can I do this? You know, I can do this thing at home in California. Can I do that there? Absolutely not. Which brings me to number 1, Vietnam. I love Vietnam. It has everything I really need. I don't need as much as some other people. It does have lesser infrastructure than somewhere like Mexico or Thailand. But it has, especially in the big cities like Hanoi and Saigon, it has basically everything. I fell in love with the food, the culture, the drink, the women. My wife, you know, is from here. She's from Saigon. And then the other really interesting or unique thing that Vietnam has, that I don't think any of the other places we've just mentioned have, is it's extremely young. You know, a few years ago when I got here, I think the average age of someone in Vietnam was 17, or like the median age, or maybe it was the median age was 17 and the average age is 30. But the point being, at 42 years old in Vietnam, I am over the hill, man. Everyone outside is younger than me, and they're excited, they're energetic, and there's real momentum. And it's backed up by all the data too, right? The GDP is growing like crazy. The inbound tourist numbers are growing like crazy. You're seeing, like, literally in 7 years, millions, tens of millions of people pulled out of poverty. And that makes it an extremely optimistic place, which I don't feel that way about back home in North America, you know? And that whatever that is, that vibe, that energy, when you're in the streets, people are looking forward. They're thinking about real, like, progress. Like, they 100% believe their kids' lives are going to be better than their life. You know what I mean? That like, what is that? That's something, right? It's something that has nothing to do really with cost, even though it does have everything to do with economics. But you can't buy that. And that's why I really fell in love with the place. At first, my first reaction was culture shock. It was like, I don't know if I can handle it. The smoke, the traffic, the pollution, the yelling, it's too much, you know? But when you settle in, you realize, like, man, people are on the go. They're absolutely hustling here. And it's fun. It's fun to be a part of that. It's fun to have hope for your kids too.
What if money was no option? Do you
Thailand.
think, like, how would... Well, not yeah, right. If that, yeah, that's what you do, and not even like I kind of mentioned that top five. Just say any country in the world. If money was no option, would it still be Thailand, or what would you say?
It might be. I mean, there's for how about this way? We won't say for myself, because for myself, it's here. I'm happy where I am. I like it here. I was living in Da Nang. Now I'm back in Saigon. I like both. They're both great options. And you can fly really affordably in Vietnam. So it's easy to get to Da Nang or Hanoi. I have an interview thing I'm doing this weekend. I'm going to fly to Hanoi on Saturday morning. And I'm going to come back on Sunday night. And there's that much infrastructure here, right? That's not a problem to find a flight and fly across the country in a day and back. But money's no option. You're looking to retire abroad. I mean, a place like Koh Samui in Thailand has it all. Really, truly has it all. Phuket, because those places just have a little bit more of the like high end sort of like luxury service being pampered thing, the kind of thing you maybe get in like the Riviera Maya or like and Puerto Vallarta, right? They have all that built up tourist infrastructure, and there's some of that in Vietnam, especially in around Da Nang and in some of the islands like Phu Quoc. There is that sort of high end resort being catered to vibe. Again, that's not something I'm looking for right now. It's not something I need in my life. Maybe I'll want that when I'm 65, but yeah.
In one of the videos, you mentioned some comments about how the people were going to making all these comments about visas, and the different countries have different rules with visas. They constantly change. You mentioned about how some of the average age is maybe like in the 50s. But as you get older, especially if you want to do, full time year round, and you have a pension, you could go to Panama, Costa Rica, Colombia. They have these pensionado programs. But how many questions do you get about the visas, and how much does that impact and create stress if you have to do a country run every 90 days, kind of, etc.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those things that I wonder, like, did someone make a video that I don't know about that went viral and then it sort of planted it in people's heads? Because that's something that you hear a lot. But the reality is that the people asking that haven't even been here for 90 days yet, basically, right? So,
right.
So step one, right? It's people. That's what it usually is. Yeah. There's people who have like, and no offense to them, but are on their couch at home, trying to decide from their couch if Thailand, the Philippines, or Vietnam is the best place to retire right now. It's like, well, you can't. But I will say this, anybody who has more than a few $1,000s a month coming in can easily find a way to stay legally long-term in Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, the Philippines, Vietnam. Okay. So sometimes you have to pay for things, right? You have to pay for legal administrative things to do things legally. But I also think it's short-term thinking, in the sense that if you've actually traveled and been around in different countries for a long time, that the visa situation is something you don't control, right? Like the things you want to worry about are the things you can control. You can control how much money you have saved, how much money you have coming in, what your budget is, you can control. But external stuff you can't control, right? Like imagine if I made a video that's like, don't go to Thailand tomorrow, there's riots. Don't go to the Philippines tomorrow, there's gun crime. Well, maybe, but those things are totally out of your control, right? That's just like or Indonesia. There was riots in Indonesia last year. Don't go to Indonesia, there's riots. Okay, that stuff is totally out of your control. There's people living happy early retirements in Indonesia, and there are riots in some other part of Indonesia, right? There's terrible pollution in Hanoi, Vietnam right now, and it's 1,200 kilometers away from me and not affecting me. So I think that it's this, it's easy to sort of fixate or pick up on things. And the reality is, at least in Vietnam, it's a lot easier for people to get visas and enter the country now than it used to be. and that's intentional. This country is very much controlled by the government in Hanoi. It's a socialist republic. They do exactly what they want to do. And they're intentional and often fast about it, right? And that's the same in other regions, right? In Thailand, you could say they're totally and completely controlled by the king, and the king decides, or the monarch decides what they're going to do, and usually fast, right? So the Philippines has changed the dollar amount to get their retirement visa multiple times. I'm sure the countries in Latin America have too. Mexico definitely has. I remember I posted a video a while ago where I was sort of like just talking off the top of my head. And I said like, oh, it costs $1,200 to do this thing in Mexico. And someone in the comments was like, fake news, you're a fucking liar. Sorry, I swore. They're like, but they were calling me that, right? They swore at me. They're like, you're a effing liar. It costs $4,400 to do that. And I was like, well, I'm out of date, man. I haven't been there in a long time. So you know what I mean? It's like, that's the same in general financial planning, thinking about the future, right? Maybe I don't actually have enough money to retire because in 10 years, Vietnam is going to be 20 times more expensive. Well, what am I going to do? Like I do think that there's a lot of that. What's the word for that? It's like catastrophizing, right? People take small bits of information and they turn it into a catastrophe at their head. And then it just creates inaction and they give themselves an excuse to not get up and do something.
What would you say about healthcare as someone that's looking to retire abroad? Even if you're in your 50s, you start getting ailments. How would you say the healthcare system is in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, just kind of Asia, Southeast Asia in general?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely dive into that in my I have a website and a membership with more like in-depth information called The Cost of Living Abroad. And that stuff is there in the guides and the written stuff I do, where I actually compare hospital to hospital, region to region, because it does vary. But I think as an objection, i.e. like if you leave America, you lose Medicare. That's actually, it's a reason to leave. It's not a reason to stay, because you're basically trading the most expensive healthcare system in the developed world for countries that are functional and affordable. And every country here has a tiered system, right? So there's going to be a basic level of public health care available to the public in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Malaysia, in Thailand, that is shockingly cheap. Yeah? And then there's going to be a second tier that's sort of like medium private care that is still extremely affordable compared to back home. And then there's going to be an elite tier that only the sort of 1% or 0.01% of locals have access to, because that's how much they cost. And aside from maybe Cambodia, but even in the Philippines, there's like one, I think it's called St. Luke's. Again, don't off the top of my head, it's in my actual written information. I think it's St. Luke's, or maybe it's St. Luke's in Malaysia. Regardless, all of those countries, Philippines, Malaysia, Bangkok, Vietnam, every single one of them has at least one like top hole world-class hospital with the best tech money can buy. And it's going to cost less than half of what healthcare in America costs, or healthcare in most European countries costs. But in European countries or in Canada, it's free, i.e. your high tax rate pays for it, right?
And you mentioned, as we're talking about how a lot of the people that contact you, the average age is 50s. It's also a male. How many of these men are single, or a lot of them are in relationships? Are they looking to move to Asia, meet some type of feminita, or is that not really, they're looking to date, that kind of stuff, or is that not really part of the equation?
No, I think it's part of the equation. I think it's part of the equation for women too. I do think that people looking to retire abroad are more likely to be single in their retirement. And I get that a lot in the questions. And I don't know that it really matters. I've spent a lot of time in a lot of different countries. Everywhere I've been, people date, people find relationships. Some people fall in love. Some people end up getting married to locals. But of course, anytime you marry across cultures, across countries, across languages, there's culture shock and there's barriers, and it's often harder to do, not easier, right? Like one of the things I warn relocation people about it is they think, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. In 3 months and 6 months, I'll meet someone, then I'll get a marriage visa like you. And that'll be so easy, right? It's like, absolutely not, man. Like getting a visa or paying for something is easy. Becoming married and involved in a long-term relationship with someone you just met is difficult. Like slow your roll, right? Like, and I don't think that's any different, whether it's in Latin America or Asia. I think, socially, one of the hardest parts is the sort of like revolving door aspect of a lot of, travel, retire abroad destinations. In choosing a big city, like one of the big pros to coming back to Ho Chi Minh City or Saigon from Da Nang, for me was that I know that the expat community here is really long term. Most of them have jobs or they have businesses or they have something they're working on. And so when I came back here, I knew a lot of guys, like buddies I could, watch a football game and have a beer with who've been here for years, right? I knew them here for years. I left for 2 years. I come back, they're all still here, right? There's a real established long-term community of expats. And it's true here with Americans and Canadians. There's a softball league, there's a ball hockey league, there's all that kind of stuff, right? Now pickleball's going crazy with both expats and local Vietnamese people. There's all these things that are just existing. There's multiple rock climbing gyms. I used to have a big rock climbing community I was involved with. Whereas in some of the more sort of touristic beach destinations, it can be really hard if you're a single person because it's just such high turnover, right? Everyone is gone after 30 days, gone after 90 days. Until I moved to Da Nang, I didn't know there was a thing about 90-day visas. I never heard of it, right? Because everyone I knew in Saigon, and this is another thing, if you're local, you call it Saigon, not Ho Chi Minh. But anyways, whatever, semantics. But, you get what I'm saying, right? Like that's the thing that's part of a very particular community. The same way I'm sure, like if you talk to the retired people in, I don't know, in say Puerto Rico, or if you talk to the retired people in Chiang Mai, Thailand, they have a particular local issues they're really focused on. Like in Chiang Mai, the people talk nonstop about that rice burning thing and the burning season and pollution or whatever. It's just like, that's not something on my radar,
As we're talking kind of about prices at the beginning of this podcast, I mean, what are some specific prices that we're talking about in Vietnam? I mean, I saw a video where I think you basically like you have 2 kids, as you mentioned, and your daycare cost is like half of your monthly spends. You're at something like $3,000 US, and the daycare was about half of that. And I mean, you have a nanny. It seems like if you were to take that lifestyle and put that back into San Francisco, like you were living in, I mean, you'd be looking at 6 figures of spend. I mean, right? If massive 6 figures,
high 6 figures. Yeah, for sure. High 6 figures.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so, yeah. So, I mean, and how would that compare to, again, like say like, Thailand or Cambodia, Malaysia, some of the countries that you're close to?
I've definitely done the comparison for Kuala Lumpur. It would be very similar, very similar. Like so there's a bit of give and take on different things. Some things may be a bit more expensive. Some things may be a bit less expensive. As you mentioned, and I talk in one of the videos, childcare, like private English language childcare, is actually more expensive in Vietnam than other places because it's a supply demand thing. There's less demand for it, so you can find more affordable international schools in Thailand and Malaysia because there's more of them, right? There's more people out there buying it. So it'll bring the cost down because the supply goes up to meet it. I think in Bangkok, I'd probably spend 50 to 60% more. Just me. And I have researched this stuff. I think it'd be 50 to 60% more. So in other words, if we're spending $3,000 here, it would be at least 4,800 or 5,000. And in Malaysia, I think it'd be close. I think 3,000, maybe 3,500. It wouldn't. But the flip side of that too is that I think if we spent 3,500 in Malaysia, there'd actually be things we could get there that we can't get here in Ho Chi Minh City, and it's cleaner. There's English. There's more cars. There's more safety. So you'd actually, you know what I mean? That small additional amount of money would actually there'd be a return on it. And I think that's true in Thailand too, in Bangkok as well. If I, like I was saying earlier, right? If I spent we'd spend a bit more money in Bangkok, but it would probably be a better school. There's more established, better schools in Bangkok than there are in Vietnam. That's just real. I do think the hospital I have access to here in Ho Chi Minh is an incredible hospital. It's founded by French doctors like 30 years ago. It's called Franco-Viet Hospital. It's world class, period. You know, and I had a knee surgery there, and it cost me $1,300 USD out of pocket for I did my meniscus on both sides, the tendons on both sides, and it was $1,300 out of pocket. Insurance covered $650. I covered the other $650. I mean, in the States, what is that? 30,000, 50,000 in Canada. If I still have public health care, like I'm not registered or whatever anymore in Canada. I'm not a resident, but in Canada, you probably wait 6 months. Maybe more, maybe 8 months, right? You just put on a knee brace and like walk around or be crushing around waiting. So that's not cool.
Yeah, as we kind of mentioned earlier, talking about the concept of snowbirding, and as I mentioned, this top 5 best and worst countries for the expats: Panama number 1, Colombia 2, Mexico 3, Thailand 4, Vietnam 5, 6 is China, 7 is UAE, 8 Indonesia, 9 Spain, and 10 is Malaysia. And I've either lived in every one of those countries,
wow,
or visited minus the UAE.
Same here.
I would, right, same, yeah. And I would just say, as someone that, if you're talking about a snowbird from the U.S., there's no way in hell I'm going to, be someplace for 3 or 4 months. And Thailand's too far away, Vietnam's too far away, China's too far away, UAE's too far away, Indonesia's too far away, Malaysia's too far away, Spain, it'd be kind of borderline. And I feel like if you're snowbirding, your priorities change just because it's like, well, my grandkid has a baby, or my daughter has a baby, I got a grandchild, I'm just going to fly out back to Kansas or Wisconsin, whatever, for, 10 days, or I'm going to have some hip replacement surgery, use my Medicaid. Well, I guess it's not Medicaid, I guess it'd be Medicare. Use my Medicare, just fly back. If you're talking the snowbird, it seems like what you actually value would be quite a bit different. And I think Mexico, really, for me, probably would be one of the more attractive places, just because you can kind of pop in and out willy-nilly.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and that's, I don't know, I didn't mention that when I did that sort of, the hypothetical top 5. Also, whatever, I'm having fun and being...
Yeah, we're having fun.
I'm being hyperbolic about it. But I do think, yeah, when I think now about, because Mexico is one of the few places I do think about living. I loved Australia, but I wouldn't move back. I'm not going to move back to Melbourne. Its cost of living there is worse than at home.
I did a work and holiday visa in Australia for a year, and I would never live in Australia.
No, it's wonderful, but like, no way. Absolutely not.
No.
And yeah, Mexico is one of the places I think of. And one of the few sort of, non-negotiable benefits of it is that, yeah, you have access to North America. It is North America, right? Like, I mean, you're there. Literally, you're there. You can get in a car and drive, right? Not many people do it. You could get in a car and drive from where I am now to Phnom Penh, Cambodia, or to Bangkok, Thailand. People do it. It's not that common to do that sort of overland trip. But that's about it, right? I mean, then you're going to hit Myanmar. Nobody's driving to Myanmar. That's not happening. Everywhere else is overseas. Or you can go up to China. You can go to China overland. Like, I really loved the time I spent in China in 2018. I thought I would go back. I planned to. And then now I look at it as just getting lucky beyond belief with Vietnam because of what happened with COVID. I know a lot of people who were working in China at the time, and they lost their jobs and more. We can leave it at that, right? If you lose your jobs and more, that's, again, it brings it back to this idea of like being stressed about visa systems and legalities. You shouldn't be stressed about the things you can't control. That's more than just when retiring abroad. In life, if you're sitting around getting stressed out about the stuff you don't control, you're just wasting time. You're just being anxious, right? You're just being...
Sticking on the topic of snowbirding, how would that change the calculus for you? Visas might be less of a of a pressure point for you, because if you're going to go somewhere for 3 months, visas might not necessarily be an issue.
Look,
But
I mean, honestly, I
yeah.
wouldn't snowbird. I don't think it's, I just wouldn't. I don't like the whole concept. Just doesn't really make sense to me. To me, part of like the reason I feel like I've been successful or been able to do what I'm doing has been not having a backup plan. You know, that's a big part of it. If you have a backup plan, I think that you're creating a way for you to quit and then lots of the moves abroad can be hard. Ultimately, it can be hard, and it does take commitment and perseverance. And snowboarding is kind of by its nature the opposite of that, right? Like it's the opposite of integrating, of learning the language. Even like Canadians who live in America, right? Like the Canadians who live in Florida or Arizona, you know, they're really sort of trying to play both sides. like what, you know, when I went to America, if it was part of any movement or thing, it would be what Canadians call the brain drain, right? Like I went to the US after college graduation to like try and make it. I wasn't planning on moving back to Canada. I wanted to, you know what I mean? Like I wanted to make it. I wanted to make a career and life out of it in the US. And when that didn't work, I kept going. But I don't, in general, I do think that you're going to have a better experience if you actually move to a place full time, if you really commit to being there. Now, I know for some people, there might be a transition. Say you're retiring to Mexico and your first 3 to 4 years, you're snowbirding while you choose the right location, doing location scouts, while you maybe look for a property where you're going to buy a house or buy property to build your house. Do you know what I mean? That's a very specific example, but like, I think in that sense, it's perfect. Right? Like snowbird, maybe for 2 or 3 years, maybe the first winter you go to Thailand, the second winter you go to the Philippines, the third winter you come here to Vietnam. And then you're really going to know which one you like. I think in that sense, I think it's awesome. But in like the traditional 20-year sense of like, I want to keep my house, I want to do everything the same way back home. There's just so many incentives in every country now. It's so different, right? It's such a different world now. All these countries are incentivizing people who are going to spend money to come to the country. And if you don't, usually if you don't commit to fully being in the country, you don't get those incentives. Right? You don't get the visa. You don't get the financial benefit. You don't get think about rent, right? There's like, even here in Vietnam, you're not getting a deal if you're renting a place by the week, you know? Like, you don't get a deal if you pay the hotel's daily rate, right? Like, it's like the deal comes from the long-term commitment. So I do think there's something to think about that. You know,
my parents have been snowbirding in Panama for over 20 years. And I guess because I go down there and visit them quite frequently. And I think, the biggest thing I've kind of noticed is a lot of them, they'll get pushed out of a job at 58 or low 60s, whatever. So they don't really have their Medicare yet. They're not really collecting their Social Security. So they'll go down to Panama, live down there full time. And then they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to live down here full time, for the next 20 years. Well, then all of a sudden their daughter or their son, they have children, they get married. Now all of a sudden they get grandkids, and it's like, and then all of a sudden they're having some health issues, and, their brother dies or whatever. And it's like, well, maybe we should kind of, we need to see our grandkids, and now we need to spend more time with family. So then what turned out to be full-time year-round living turns into, okay, we're just going to spend 3-4 months down here. And then eventually what turns into 3, 4, 5 months turns into, well, maybe we'll just move to Florida. We'll move to the villages, which turns into, as you get older, you don't care about the beach. Maybe we'll move to Arizona, or maybe move to Texas. And, like I said, my parents have done this for over 2 decades, and I've been around these friends. I've talked to these people, and that's kind of like the transition that I've seen over the last couple decades of being down there.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, maybe it's just an age thing, maybe the retirement abroad thing really suits the 50 to 70 bracket better than the 70 to 90 bracket. I mean, this can get back to the whole concept of Social Security, right? It was only supposed to pay out for 3 years based on life expectancy when it was created. And now people expect it to pay out for 30 years. Is that real? You know what I mean? I don't have answers for that. I certainly can't tell you. I mean, my parents had retired from the city to a lake house for 12 years, and they sold it and left it because they were isolated, because there were long winters, because whatever. Then they tried coming here and snowbirding in Vietnam. The logistics of it don't make it real for them now, and they're sort of late 70s, or happy birthday, Dad. My pa just turned 80, you know? Like, I don't know. I don't think there's any easy answers to these things. The flip side is there's also, I meet people, right? And like, I do interviews with expats and retirees here. There's also people who come to my meetups and at events who don't want to be on camera. And like, that's cool, man. I respect that. But some of those people are people who have been here for 20 years, 30 years and committed, you know? And it's like, that's the choice, right? It's like, well, I don't see my grandkids. It is what it is, right? Like, there's never going to not be a trade-off in life. And ultimately, we're talking about like how to best find happiness. All I can really do is like share my own story with people about the things that it has helped me with, the challenges I've had. And at the end of the day, be like, maybe it's for you, maybe it's not for you. You know, I can just be honest about it, right? Like, there's a great saying, kind of aphorism. We could end on it. It's like, if you're honest, you don't have to remember anything.
On this topic, kind of last question, just as, you know, when I'm down in Panama talking to my parents' friends, a lot of the Canadians, one of the reasons a lot of them only leave for 3 months is they say that you lose your health care and you have to go back to Canada and you have to kind of reapply, whatever. And so there's kind of a lot of other, you know, kind of red tape issues. I mean, like, how many red tape issues? Like, I mean, I imagine if you're, you know, 45, 50 and healthy, maybe you really don't care. But if you're 75, it's probably a bigger issue for you. I mean, do you get many questions on that? And what's your experience with that? Especially being a Canadian yourself.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff around the taxes and the money. I think that's also, I mean, again, it just comes down to commitment. And in your case, too, you're talking about your parents, and I'm talking about my parents. We're talking about couples. I mean, we already basically said it's easier if you're single, right? I do think if you're a retired couple, I don't know the numbers, but I'm sure a lot more retired couples end up in France, Italy, and Spain, you know, right? And that it's a lot easier for them. What's that Shenzhen visa? Is it 180 days? I think it's 180 days, right? So you go, it's set up for them basically as a Canadian or American. You can spend half the year there. You can buy a house. You can buy property in a lot of those countries really easily. Yeah, I think it'd be cool if there's, you know, more couples coming over and retiring and doing their thing in Southeast Asia. And I think the biggest change about this, again, it's the finances. Everyone has to do their own finances. I'm not a financial guru. Is the healthcare, right? I think as hospitals and healthcare get better and better here, then it really opens things up. You know, I know a Canadian guy, maybe this is the last funny little anecdote we'll finish on, a Canadian guy who had like a cardiac event sitting at a bar in Da Nang this winter. And he saw a doctor or whatever, and they were like, you know, you should do this, you should check in the clinic, you should have surgery. And he said, oh, okay. And he immediately went to the airport and flew to Canada. And he had his surgery in Canada. And then he came back a few weeks later. So should that be legal? I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. But you know what I mean? Like you lose certain privileges when you're no longer a Canadian taxpayer, right? No longer a Canadian legal resident. You know, like I do think that there's some aspect of kind of like, so, like people come to you that scenario and they're like, I want everything. And you're like, well, that's a pipe dream, man. Like that's not real, right? You're always going to give up something. There's always going to be a trade-off.
So today's guest has been Evan, who has the YouTube channel 11A, which talks about moving to Vietnam. So, Evan, just two final questions. One, where can people find you, get a hold of you, that kind of information? And then secondly, leave us with a final thought related to this podcast.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on, Jesse. I really appreciate it. You can find me on YouTube at Evan EHA. Just type in Evan A into the search bar and I'll come up, no doubt. Or you can get on my website, costoflivingabroad.com, if you want my help or are serious about relocating to Southeast Asia. And a final thought would just be, I'm going to go right back to where we started and say, if you're curious, if you're sitting on the fence about any kind of retirement abroad, whether it's in Panama, in Colombia, in Mexico, in Thailand, in the Philippines, or in Vietnam, the absolute first step is to buy a plane ticket and go to Location Scout and see if you're the ideal fit for any of these places and vice versa.
My dear friends, that is it for this episode of El Podcast. Once again, if you're not yet subscribed, please subscribe on YouTube as well as Rumble. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from. We thank you all from the bottom of our hearts for watching and listening, and we will see you on the next episode.